founder, when that monument opened, along with the three soldiers and the flag, it made more complete this memorial. We had thousands of women that served with us in combat, various roles, from Janice Nart, U.S. Army nurse, air traffic controllers, all sorts of specialty positions. If I would have included the so-called donut dollies, all college graduate young women who came over there voluntarily. We have a donut dolly joining us tonight for supper with my reunion coming. There you are. 1968, Fire Base Sioux. Two of these beautiful young women showed up and wanted to play games with a bunch of tongue-tied 19-year-old combat infantrymen who had to order out of their bunkers to go over there and talk to them. But it was really wonderful, the outsized contribution that women made to our fight in Vietnam. So Debbie Alexander Moore is going to speak on behalf of Vietnam Women's Memorial Foundation. She served 2 tours in Vietnam in what was then called Army Special Services. Today it's Morale, Welfare, and Recreation. She operated in, that service operated 14 base camps throughout Vietnam. And unlike many of us, she stayed on for a second tour. Debbie's dad, who's still living, I think at age 96 he told me, she's the oldest daughter of an Army Air Corps B-29 commander who flew 13 combat missions over Japan during World War II. And so at age 21, Debbie was the youngest woman to deploy to Vietnam with Army Special Services. Please welcome our Women's Memorial speaker, Debbie Alexander Moore.
Thank you, General McCaffrey. 48 years ago, I could not have imagined coming here to recount the most dramatic decision I ever made, going to Vietnam. Vietnam, her hard-working local nationals, their endearing children, the new sights, sounds, smells, and afternoon monsoon storms, and the scary times when the Viet Cong decided to fire rockets and mortars at us. Then there were the men in uniform walking around with guns. Oh, sorry, they're weapons. For those of you who understand that. Fortunately, most were great people who were ready to instruct, scold, guide, protect, and forgive us when we occasionally went outside the wire on unauthorized helicopter rides or mistook a command sergeant major for a general. Well, as the oldest in a family of 4 daughters and no sons, I began my adventure shortly after graduation from San Francisco State. Before following my parents in a teaching career, I wanted to travel, and I was aware of several of my male classmates headed to Vietnam. I'd always been adventuresome, and I wanted to serve my country, just as my father had done in World War II. Well, I met a recruiter who told me about Army Special Services, girls, who operated recreation facilities worldwide for the enlisted man. And yes, we were called girls in those days. She said they offered daily activities and events accompanied by endless supplies of coffee and snacks and so forth. More importantly, she stressed that the girls were there to offer a little home away from home for our enlisted men who were there so they could relax away from their officers and NCOs. Well, 4 months later, I was in a C-130 cargo plane headed to Soc Trang, the tiny, tiny little airfield deep in the Mekong Delta. The plane was filled with wooden pallets, and the only other passenger on the plane was my area supervisor, Ricky, who wanted to introduce me to my new boss, the club director. She said Louise and I would be the only 2 girls on an airfield of about 400 men, and that Louise was anxious to get me trained because she needed to go on R&R. Well, when the C-130 slammed down on this short PSP runway at Soc Trang, I looked out the window and I saw these deuce-and-a-half trucks and these 3/4-ton trucks following us, where we stopped. And Ricky said, "Look, Debbie, all these guys are so excited to see you." Well, that excitement lasted about 30 seconds because then we quickly learned the compound had been without beer for 2 weeks. And our cargo was actually pallets of beer. So you guys can appreciate that. The first few days were really intense on the job training because I'd received very little the first 2 days in Saigon beforehand. I learned that we were to be at our rec centers or service clubs, as some of you guys remember, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, offering welcoming smiles, a sympathetic ear, and we often played the big sister role to young men who felt uncomfortable talking with their leaders or their buddies about troubling events in their lives. Such things as family illnesses and wives in financial distress. And occasionally there was tragically the Dear John letter that they had to deal with. One of my favorite activities was hosting orphans parties, and many of our units asked their family members to send toys and other special bits of clothing and things from the States. Our soldiers would simply melt at the sight of these little ones as they sang and danced for us. Sadly, there was a toddler at one of our first parties that I noticed who was missing both her hands. The nun who ran the orphanage told me that the Viet Cong had come through her village quite some time ago, shaking down the residents for rice, and her family had none to give them, so they took their youngest child and cut her hands off. So then she became a little orphan in our special little orphanage. I have her picture, I took it, I keep her picture in my bedroom and look at it nearly every day. One wish I will always have is to know what happened to her. After 6 months at Sok Trang and having to deal with the loss of 6 very special friends who were KIA, killed in action, I was transferred to Cu Chi, home of the 25th Division. Even though it was a much larger base, the enemy managed to find us, and I experienced forever my first ground attack in February of '69, where we lost 14 men and 9 Chinook helicopters. I was scheduled to go to Korea to finish my obligation to special services, but when I got home to California, I just felt like I hadn't finished what I needed to do in Vietnam, so I volunteered to go back. Well, did we girls make any difference? It's hard to know, but let me share one personal story. One night, a sandy-haired GI came in the club and asked me for some stationery. I gave it to him, and I could tell he was really agitated. And I asked him what was wrong, and he finally told me that he'd just come in from the field, and his unit had lost several men. He also said towards the end of this that his squad was entering what was to be called a friendly village. And a little girl about 8 years old came out to greet the squad, and she gave the squad leader a bouquet of flowers. And when the squad leader bent down to accept the flowers, they detonated a Seymour-packed explosive on the little girl's chest and blew her up and killed the squad leader and wounded several other of the guys in his squad. He was so upset that, and so enraged that he said he'd lost all trust and he wanted to take out, every Vietnamese that he saw. I talked with him quite some time, and the only comfort I have, and hopefully I was some comfort to him, was he did agree to see his unit chaplain. I also remember hundreds of others, including my sisters in service, GIs that I loved for all they did, and local nationals who profoundly affected my outlook on life. So much of what I am today, I learned from them, and they will always have a handprint on my heart. When I look at this hallowed wall, I touch the names of the friends that I knew who lost their lives in Vietnam, but I also think about the thousands of other soldiers I spoke with during those 2 years, and I just wonder how many of their names are etched on that wall that I'll never know. Vietnam was the most significant experience of my life, and I'm so grateful to have been able to serve with some of the bravest, hardest working, and compassionate men and women I have ever known. In closing, I love this wall, and thanks to Diane Carlson Evans, our beautiful women's memorial across the way. I came to its dedication in 1993 and returned in 2013, where, by chance, I was reunited after 45 years with my personal hero, who is now my husband, Doug. In my mind, the Women's Memorial will forever be a healing, magical, and a beautiful reminder of the role we women played in Vietnam, whether we were nurses, Army Special Services, donut dollies, or any of the other women groups serving there. And for all of you that served and your family members and those currently in service, I thank you and honor you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.